Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Waxcast, episode 34. I'm your host, Gavin Wax, and today is a special episode of the Waxcast, a first in this short little podcast known as Wax. Our first elected official, elected Republican official, elected any official from the great state of Florida and nationally. So this is a first really for us. But I wanted to bring on someone who I admire, who I've been following on Twitter for a while. I don't know a lot about Florida politics, but I know about this gentleman, Mr. Anthony Sabitini, who is a state representative from District 32. I have no idea where District 32 is. He's going to enlighten us about the district lines. But he is very much in line with a lot of my views, a lot of the views, I'm sure, of some of our listeners. I don't want to, label him as anything, but I can maybe say sort of along the lines of a Trumpian populist type of Republican. Is that correct,
Oh,
Representative?
yeah, I like that. That's
All
good.
right, perfect. So tell us, where
The
is your,
Florida version. The Florida version.
the Florida version? Perfect. Well, that can mean a lot of things. We'll have to delve into that. But thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, man. I've been following you, and I'm excited to be on. I've followed a few of these podcasts you've done, Waxcast that you've done, and I'm pretty excited to be on.
Yes, well, thank you for being here. So let's get a little background information before we start, because Florida is obviously a big state, and a lot of people have some preconceptions. So where is District 32? Where do you call
So,
home?
how do you not know? I'm kidding. District 32 are it's like the far west suburbs of Orlando. So if you're
Okay,
right dead center in the middle of Florida, the super Republican district where everybody lives west of Orlando, west of Orange County, west of Disneyland, Disney World rather, is my district. It's a very long district. It's pretty much the whole corridor just west of Orlando, from the top of the county down to where Disney is. If your viewers know Disney, it's south of Orlando actually, and it goes all the way down there to almost Polk County. It's called Lake County. Is the county I represent.
if my viewers don't know Disney, I'd be very sad for them. That must be a pretty miserable existence. But that's awesome. That's good to hear. I think I'll be down in your neck of the woods actually for CPAC. Then I guess that's where you are. You're in the center of the conservative nation essentially. So that's awesome. But I wanted to bring you on because obviously Florida's been at the news a lot lately, not for what they're usually known for, which tends to be shirtless mullet man with an AK. Robs a store and flees on horseback. That is not why I'm bringing you on. But if you have some kind of reference from District 32 that relates to, please let us know. But I wanted to bring you on because obviously I'm in New York and I think half my state has already moved to Florida. Lost a lot of friends, lost a lot of people I know. They moved down to the Sunshine State, and it seems to be things are going pretty well down there. You have a governor who I like him. He seems like he knows what he's talking about. He has some good ideas. He seems eloquent. He may be a contender. What's your take on Florida? Is Florida really the new frontier in this country? Is it the new, what California used to be maybe 40 years ago? Is Florida the place to be?
I think it is. I think that if you look at it from all angles, if you look at it objectively, all the different kind of measurements you could reduce it to, Florida's the best state to be right now across the board. I thought Texas would actually be a little bit more free or a little bit more interesting. I follow most of the state legislatures. I serve in the state legislature. I follow most of them, and I see how they've responded to COVID and what they were doing in the years before COVID. And I just thought Texas was going to end up leading the nation. I thought, us being in Florida, pretty purple state, I didn't realize that, we would end up being sort of the beacon of freedom and liberty that we ended up being. And a lot of it the credit has to go to Ron DeSantis, our governor, who was my congressman before in North Central Florida. He was my congressman before he was elected to the governorship. So I knew he was very liberty leaning, populist kind of streak, conservative, and we knew he would be doing good, but I didn't think he'd be doing so much better than everybody else. And he has. He's outperformed, I think, every governor in the country. The only person in his relative realm is Kristi Noem, and I think he's even done better than her considering the circumstances.
I
We're the
agree.
third biggest state, so yeah. I mean, it's been exciting to watch, and when it comes to state government, local government, the open economy, I think right now we certainly are the envy of the nation. It's one of the reasons I wanted to stay in Florida too. Once I got more interested in politics, I realized Florida would be a good place to be as a conservative. I was like, if I go somewhere else, I don't know if I'll ever be able to have a political life or get elected or anything, because I just don't know if other states, have that
No, it's true. I mean, you'd probably already be in some gulag somewhere if you were in New York. So I'm glad you're still a free man in Florida. But speaking of freedom, I mean, it seems like Florida's first in the nation. I mean, a lot of people have been looking for some answers, some solutions now that we've lost pretty much all elements of federal control outside of the judiciary, for whatever that's worth. But people are looking to the states, to really step in these legislatures, and you as a state legislator have a lot to say on this front. And I know you were actually kind of in the forefront of pushing out some possible legislation that could deal with big tech, tackle it from a rational perspective, something that could, balance things out. Obviously, you don't want to, completely destroy the free market, but you also don't want these companies just to be trampling over rights and, taking advantage of their platforms, abusing 230, which is really a government privilege at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But now we see your governor also coming out with a plan. So tell me, what's going on? Does this have legs in the legislature? What's the makeup? Do you guys have a supermajority? Is this basically a done deal, or is it just bluff?
So here's what's going on. We are a Republican state. We have a Republican governor. We got a Republican Supreme Court. If you know what I mean. We have a Republican Senate and House. We have pretty healthy margins. We won more seats in the House and the Senate this last year than ever before. Anything we want to do, any piece of conservative legislation that gets moving is going to pass. The real question is simply what's it going to look like? What's the degree of seriousness it's going to take? And I'll give you the perfect example. So DeSantis crushed his gubernatorial primary opponent, a guy named Adam Putnam. He was like a swamp creature, long-term congressman who later became a cabinet officer in the Florida government. DeSantis destroyed him and got Trump's endorsement largely because he was such a firm believer in E-Verify. He wanted to basically end illegal immigration. So DeSantis got elected, and he talked a lot about E-Verify and expected a really strong E-Verify bill. What a lot of the rhinos and the moderates did in the legislative process, though, is they passed what I call fake E-Verify. They passed a bill that was like, well, we're passing E-Verify, but any private business has the option to use it. They can use it if they want, but they could also use I-9 documents to prove immigration status for somebody. We're facing basically the exact same situation again here before us now. DeSantis, who is a true conservative, wants a legitimate stopping of the social media censorship. He wants a bill that stops social media censorship and banning and all the rest of it. Now the ball is back in the court of the House and the Senate, the Florida legislature. So I'm praying and hoping and wishing and fighting to make it that the legislature in Florida does a real version of stopping social media censorship.
Not watered down.
Not a watered down version. And I was a little dismayed when I saw the bill hasn't been written yet. It's in what they call the committee process. It's being kind of discussed and debated right now.
Right.
The final product hasn't hit the Florida sort of debate yet. But I'm a little dismayed because they've already labeled it the and I hate to throw cold water on what is a great idea, right? But I'm just being real.
But you're about to do it, so might as well.
They're calling it the Transparency in Technology Act. Transparency. And this is kind of what you see with state legislatures, and I think obviously DC too, where they say, we're going to approach this problem, we're going to fix the problem. And what they end up doing is sort of like a bill that looks maybe to like a layman or like a person that's not really following the process, looks like they're acting on a certain subject, but they don't actually present a bill or an item amendment that addresses
has any meat.
So, yeah, because we don't need transparency. I don't need to know why Facebook is banning me, right? So
right.
If Facebook bans me and says, oh, it's because election interference, a bill that creates 100% transparency isn't going to help me or democracy by banning me and all these other citizens, journalists that are discussing. We just need to make it that they can't do it. So
I did see his plan, and a few things jumped out to me. Obviously, I'm going to preface, kind of like how you just prefaced with the cold water statement, I'm going to say that this is a great first step. No one else is doing this. This is amazing that it's happening, and I'm glad it's happening at the state level, especially in an influential state like Florida, which has a booming economy, which has a growing population, and it's not like some small state that could just be ignored. Florida is a big player. The first thing that struck out to me were the fines. So $100,000. For if they ban a candidate, okay, I like the direction. Yeah. I don't think that's that big of a disincentive. I also don't think it covers enough people. I would expand it to be not only candidates but elected officials, because really the impetus for this was that they banned the sitting president. He wasn't a candidate when they banned him anymore. Right. So I would expect that to be broadened a bit. I also think we saw situations like Poland. They put out a bill in their parliament which said $1 million for this kind of thing. And I think that would be a real deterrent. I love the litigation side of it, though. I love that it would allow people to bring suits. I think that's really the meatiest part of it. I think the fees, though, and who it applies to is a little on the weaker side. I mean, what do you make of that?
I think what you said is exactly right, and I'm going to go a little more into detail. And I'm hoping that I'm probably the first Floridian, especially legislator, to kind of discuss this item probably closely. So hopefully this podcast goes viral and people know what's going on.
I am going to push it very hard. So let your heart be heard.
Let me start by saying this. So the first thing is, we're in a gifted position in the sense of we're not designing a bill for some possible future harm. We're not like we need to design a legislative bill that could potentially be used. We know what kind of harm it's already caused, right, and that we have to try to fix. And we have the two best examples you could ever imagine. Actually, let's go with three. So one is Donald Trump in office as a non-candidate, but who's just, obviously speaking his mind, talking about what's going on with the integrity of the election, getting banned. The second example is going backwards, Hunter Biden, the story on Hunter Biden from New York Post being completely and totally suppressed. And then third, I would say a private company like MyPillow, because it's associated with an owner who they don't like his view on the election, bans the MyPillow page, the corporate page, not just Mike Lindell. Three distinct examples of the harm we should try to fix. The bullet points that were put out in the press release based on this, in regards to kind of pump up this Transparency Technology Act, don't actually fix any of those three very distinct types of harms, distinct situations that we need to sort of channel our entire focus and energy on. And so I know that the bill has a long way to go. It's going to have committee stops. First of all, it's got to be written, because everything that DeSantis has been quoted on, and it's been talked a lot by the media, has actually just been his assertions of what should be in the bill. Those are actually just the things that he's saying, this is what I want. Now,
but he can't introduce it. He's not a member of the legislature.
He can't introduce it, but he can really put a model bill out there and really put a lot of focus on what the bill should look like specifically. But once again, we're going to have legislators that are going to be moving this bill. Now, let me say another thing about this dynamic between the legislature and the government and what needs to happen with this bill. I have somebody who is very involved in the introduction and in the writing of the bill. And he or she said that the tech companies have already done what they called lobbying up. In Tallahassee and state capitals, basically that means is they've showed up with a checkbook and they're basically trying to buy every lobbyist, every reputable or influential lobbyist in this town. This happened 2 years ago when DeSantis did a bill that allowed us to bring in pharmaceutical drugs from Canada. He pushed a bill that said, hey, if Canada has subsidized drugs, why can't those be sold in the free market? Bring them here. The pharmaceutical company showed up with a blank check. Now, we still passed the bill and it was great, but they made it much more, it made it.
It was a messier process that it had to be.
That's what's happening right now. These big tech companies, especially Facebook and Google, I think Twitter too, but I haven't seen fingerprints yet, are purchasing every lobbyist in town and putting up a front to try to water down the bill. I think they know that something's going to pass. They just want to simply throw as much cold water on as possible. They basically dampen this bill to where it's like completely meaningless and it's just symbolic.
Well, that was my fear as well, that they were going to come down. That's why I asked about the majorities, because I was hoping that you guys have a good, firm majority in both houses, which you apparently do. But still, I mean, the threat of all this lobbying from particularly Facebook and Google, and it's interesting that you said just really them, not Twitter. I mean, they're the ones with the most to lose. They're the real big players. I mean, Twitter's the more kind of like everyone knows it because it's more involved in the political scene. But in terms of money and influence, I mean, Google and Facebook are kind of in a different league of their own. But what's funny about these big tech companies is that they basically took advantage of a short-term power dynamic, between the election and Trump's ouster from office to basically ram through this really regressive censorship purge, whatever you want to call it. And they're basically setting themselves up for an inevitable showdown where they're going to be regulated, where they're going to have new restrictions placed, and their business model is going to be changed, completely. It seems like they'd have to be really stupid to think that it wouldn't have come to something like what we're describing right now. So, I mean, do you think they don't care? Do you think, why would they, or I don't even know the question.
Here's what I think.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. And this is where being in the legislative process, whether it's state or DC, kind of gives you a little bit of insight that a lot of folks probably aren't paying attention to. They are probably at this point, and this is likely based on past fights, the pharmaceutical stuff, the E-Verify fight, all this stuff. They're banking on basically trying to influence the legislature to pass such a watered-down bill where they could claim all the credit in the world, right? You're already seeing it. People are like, oh, my God, this is the best bill ever. But the truth of the matter is we don't know what the bill is yet. The devil is in the details. They could pass a bill that just says, a political candidate during election can't be banned from a platform unless Facebook pays this fine. Okay, I get it. That sounds great, but that is not the issue whatsoever. The issue is all the influencers, your citizen journalists, your normal person, the guy who runs the Republican Club in downtown, Lakeland or whatever. These guys and all their networks and the news that they're sharing, right, is we need to make sure that free flow of information is protected.
Right.
These tech companies are probably banking on trying to basically form fit the language of the bill to make it that candidates are protected, or a political committee is protected, or if you could opt out of an algorithm if you don't like being advertised a certain good that's associated with a liberal company, whatever. Like, this is kind of like innocuous stuff.
Right.
But the actual straight up, you can be deplatformed. You can be.
That's the big issue.
That's the issue.
Right.
Well,
that's why it's worrying that the starting point with DeSantis's bill wasn't higher, because obviously whatever he's proposing, kind of in this theoretical sense, or the model bill as you described it, it's probably going to be, that's just the starting point. It's going to get whittled down further. So that's why when I saw it, I was happy because it was the first, but I was hoping it would come out even stronger, because if he had gone all in and it had been, way more intense of a legislative proposal in terms of the fines, the penalties, what it would do, that won't get passed most likely, but somewhere in the middle. But now if it's looking at what he proposed, you could just cut 50% off of it. And that's kind of, it's not as exciting as first thought.
Here's what and you're exactly right, but here's what makes this issue interesting. This, in my opinion, we're talking to constituents and Floridians around the state. I travel the state, talk to a lot of Republican clubs. This issue is so burning razor hot, and there are so many people so interested in it from a personal perspective, in the sense of they've been banned or their club's been kicked off. They couldn't share the Hunter Biden story, whatever it be. That they're not going to let a fake bill go through. The minute that bill gets filed, now the media is going to try to act like, let's say they do go down with a watered down bill. It's the bill that's 10% of what needs to pass. The media will act like it's 110%. This is the biggest censorship bill. It won't matter. I think technology and social media companies and just the interconnectedness of just today, people are going to realize, is this a real social media censorship bill or not? And I think it's people like yourself and myself and people who are sharing this information to say, we're going to hold the legislature accountable. We're going to hold politicians accountable, make sure they pass a real bill that prevents the social media censorship, not a transparency bill, not a fluff bill, and not a bill that just looks symbolically good but does very little.
So actually, before I get to the timeline, I want to ask you, what are the limitations here? Because obviously the state, there's federal laws, there's federal statutes, there's 230, there's this new Democrat-controlled Congress. I mean, are there any fears that whatever Florida does, it could be neutered or counteracted by something at the federal level, either existing law or statute, or something that could come into fruition? I mean, what's the dynamic of the relationship there?
There are no real limits, right? So Section 230 is about preventing liability for the publishing of other people's information, et cetera. But in terms of just passing a basic business regulation that says if you do commerce in our state, we're going to disallow content moderation. You're not allowed to do it. You're just simply not allowed to do it. It's not protected. And then their counter argument to that cannot be, oh, well, it's protected under First Amendment, right? It's not, not to get into the legalese. We could easily pass a business regulation that says if you're 75 million or plus and you're a company and you're operating and you have a social media site, you're not allowed to do content moderation unless you have somebody that is clearly and you could put some very strong legal language in there, so something like clearly demonstrating breaking the law, right? They have a gambling operation, pornography, whatever, not even this seems illegal. It has to put some really strong language in there that says, if it's evidenced or as clear as day, that they could be banned for that, but you cannot deplatform otherwise.
Now, what's the timeline, you think? I mean, this just got proposed. I mean, is this going to be a year? Is this going to be 2 years? Like, what's the process in Florida? Does it move as slow as Congress? I mean, you guys have
Oh
the
no, yeah.
numbers.
This is
I
the
mean, so what
opposite.
the mechanics? What's going on down there?
So most legislatures, it's like the opposite, right? So in New York, where you live in a lot of the like bluer states, they have like these year-round state legislatures. They're always meeting. There's always something going on.
Right.
Conservative states, it's the opposite. So like Texas only meets state legislature every 2 years.
I think I do. I have heard that. I have heard of that.
But
Yeah.
the beauty is, we actually in Florida, we're so like, I guess you could say conservative on this issue that we meet even less. So even though they meet every 2 years, they meet for 140 days. We only meet for 120 days over the course of 2 years because we meet 60 a year. Yeah. So right now we're in what they call committee weeks. So there's 5 committee weeks and then 60 days of session. That's it. Literally, it's 3.5 months for the whole year. So we're halfway through the committee weeks, which is kind of like a pre-planning. Like some bills are moving. There's very specific debates having on like bills that are being formed. But then session is when everything hits the floor and everybody's got their microphone and they're debating the bills, et cetera, et cetera. So we're like a third through this session, right? We have the committee weeks, but we've got the whole session ahead of us, and we're almost done with committee weeks. This bill will probably be put into ink, I would say, in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And then they got to go through. Yeah.
Are you going to be part of that? Are you going to be co-sponsoring? Are you going to be on that?
I will absolutely co-sponsor the bill. But
does it start in the Senate or the House?
So this version will start in the House. I mean, usually you file a bill in both houses, and then they move along, and hopefully they stay the same. If not, they got to take each other's changes, and then the final.
So this is the best civics lesson anyone's getting on local government. By the way, I'm learning stuff right now, so I hope everyone's paying attention. But this is great.
State and local government, but yeah. So this version, because it was the governor's kind of preference, and he alluded to it in the press conference, this one's going to start in the House. It's going to start in a committee. The chairman of that committee, who's another Republican, will introduce the bill. It'll be debated. There'll be amendments. It'll move through all the stuff, and then there'll be a mirror copy of it going through the Senate at the same time. And then, as long as they agree, the versions are the same. One of them will pass either the House or Senate first, and then they'll go to the other house, pass it, and the governor will sign it. There will be a bill that passes. There will be a bill that makes it through. What we need to make sure that people are doing, though, is being focused and holding accountable people who are going to be influential over the seriousness of the bill, the severity of the bill. I mean, like I said, I think there should just be a straight up prohibition on deplatforming, right? Your old school conservatives are going to say, hold on.
Do you think there's a chance to push that through? Do you think you could have some support to maybe just get that included, or is that for another fight?
I think there's absolutely a chance to get it through. And I think that DeSantis and a lot of Republicans don't want to have this session end in May by saying, we passed a bill, but it doesn't actually do anything. It's not really stopping you or Donald Trump. Listen, those metrics are the perfect metrics to me. Will the bill that we file make it that Donald Trump can't be kicked off Twitter?
I just heard that on Newsmax. They asked him. I think it was Greg Kelly asked DeSantis, is this going to help Trump get back on Twitter? And looking at the original proposal, I don't see how it could. And even DeSantis was kind of like, we don't know.
See, that's a problem. But this is the beauty of this podcast and Newsmax and all these guys moving forward with these questions right now, is because when these questions are being asked by the media and it's being pushed, they're not going to allow a undesirable, cheap, fake version of social media censorship bill pass. I mean, we're the first state in the nation. We have to be the model state. We have to do a real, robust bill. And I'm so glad that you told me that, because I didn't get to catch it tonight. He did DeSantis did 3 interviews tonight. I didn't get to watch them, but
he did great. No, he did fantastic.
Okay,
he did fantastic.
They're already asking the hard questions.
They did, and they put him on the spot. And I think I think politically, if this was the bill and DeSantis and the Florida legislature were the ones that pushed it through, that got the president back onto Twitter, I mean, that would be a game changer. I mean, that would be political. I mean, the political capital you'll gain from that is immeasurable. I mean, it would be amazing thing to see happen. But I'm glad that there is a chance for this to be even stronger, and I'm glad you're giving inside baseball on this, because a lot of people they saw this and they're not exactly sure what's the future to hold. I have 2 quick questions though before we move on from this. One, Are there going to be some flaky Republicans who could really mess this up? And do you think any Democrats would come on board? That's one. Like, what's the dynamic? Because obviously, we always see in a lot of states. There are a lot of states that have, very strong Republican legislatures. I know Ohio is one, but then a lot of them are kind of like Kasich Rhino types, and they never want to move the ball forward. And there's some like obstructionism in their own party. So that's the first question. And also, if you think you'll see Democrats flip. And two, if this bill comes into fruition, do you think this is going to be a domino effect? And do you think multiple other states are going to jump on board and start passing similar bills, stronger bills, even if you don't make it to the model status that you mentioned? Where do you think we go from there?
So I'll start backwards with your second question. Well, no matter what we pass, states are going to look to it as a model, and that could be a good or bad thing. If we pass a junk bill, they're going to go, look, that's the proper kind of bill, and it's going to be passed around, and they're going to, and that's a bad situation. So, but we need to do the right kind of bill because it's going to spread like wildfire, and all these other states are going to copy it. We need to make sure it's a good product. But going back to your first question, no Democrat will get on this bill. Absolutely not. The issue is already way too politicized, and the Democrats are pretty hard left today, even in the state legislature.
There's no more blue dogs left.
No, they're gone. Those people are gone. They actually exist as citizens. I meet them once in a while. I was talking to somebody yesterday that was like, I'm a gun guy, but this isn't. That's very rare. In elected, they don't exist anymore. Even in North Florida, which is like more like Alabama or Georgia,
right.
They simply do not exist. It's hard left through and through. You won't get one vote. What you will get is a few flaky Republicans that jump off the bill. The amount of Republicans that jump off the bill or says, "Oh, this is a business regulation, whatever," and get off, is going to be dictated by how serious, how strong this bill is. If it's a fake bill, if it's okay, you're a candidate in office during an election, you can't be banned by Facebook. If that's what we're really going to roll with,
right.
You're not going to lose a single Republican because that's the bar is set so low. Like
that is a small victory. I mean, I'll take it. It'll be good, but it'll be the smallest of victories.
It's a joke. I would hate that if that happened. But if you do the right thing, if you pass a bill that says you simply cannot deplatform unless the person is, can be basically proven that they're committing a crime or doing something that's like a pure act of defamation, which they could be liable. Which even that is, I don't know if I would even want that in the bill. That's when you'll start to see Republicans jump off and that's going to have to do with lobbyist influence and, just weakness. There is a lot of rhinos, a lot of weak Republicans in the state legislatures, and Florida is no exception.
Yeah, that is definitely a shame. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I thought was interesting, and I want to touch on it more. You said that you had originally thought that Texas may be really, the beacon of liberty among the states, among the laboratories of democracy, and you were a little surprised that Florida has really taken that mantle in many ways. There is something interesting that I see developing between the two states. You see Texas, there was a lot of controversy lately because they're bringing in all this big tech into Austin. And I know a lot of people from New York, from the tech industry are moving to Austin. Yeah. I know a lot of people from California are moving to Austin. And it is changing that state because it's a lot of these individuals who work in these industries that are have really no natural affinity towards the values of Texas. And
rootless cosmopolitans.
Yes, so you said it, rootless cosmopolitans. And it's changing the demographics. It's changing the voting patterns. If you look at a place like Georgia, they did the film tax credits, and they brought this massive film industry into Georgia.
About that many times.
Yes, and then some people can point to that turning Georgia purple or even blue. Florida seems, with this bill in particular, it seems to be taking a different approach. It says, yes, we're open for business, and I believe it was actually the mayor of Miami. I saw someone on Fox. I know, and they called him out on it. And they said, "Well, don't you think this is going to create issues for you down the line because you're basically inviting your own destruction? You're inviting the type of people that are going to vote for policies that are going to eventually make this state another New York or another California." How do you balance wanting to bring in new business, want to bring in more people, want to keep your state prosperous with the other end of that stick, which is it's going to bring voting patterns that are really going to decimate what makes the state great to begin with?
Well, it's a bit of a complex question, but if I phrase it another way, I think it's easy to answer, which is why should we be trying to pull certain types of sectors into the state when you know that there are people who are going to be taking the jobs and getting the net benefit of the existence of those businesses are coming along with it to suck it up. So it's so stupid. I've always tweeted and talked about how Georgia really turned their state purple by bringing in 50 to 100,000 Georgians in and creating a film industry that is extremely hostile. I would say almost hateful, if not extremely hateful. of Georgia values and family values and the types of working class traditional Trump supporting Republicans who live in the state of Georgia. The same thing's happening in Texas, and an absolutely atrocious, moronic, stupid mayor of the city of Miami named Francisco Suarez, who endorsed Andrew Gillum, the Democrat who ran against. By the way, this guy Francisco Suarez is an alleged Republican. He's a registered Republican.
That was always weird to me that they had an elected Republican as mayor
he
too.
He uses it as like a symbol of like, oh look, I'm like I can reach out across the like I'm Republican, but I have values.
But I'm a good Republican. I'm a good Republican, right?
You got to remember the Cuban community, the real Cuban community, not that nimwit, but the older Cubans whose families literally were like, killed in, the Bay of Pigs and everything else, who were still down there.
Right.
They
would never vote for someone with a D.
They're not voting for somebody with a D, and even a guy like him has a chance of getting their votes because he has an R next to him. It's stupid. It's the way it is. He's actively trying to bring in these tech companies that will end up destroying Florida. Ron DeSantis only won Florida by a little bit less than 40,000 votes in a state with 21.5 million people today. I think it was like 21.2 at the time. It's insane that this guy's doing this. It should be stopped. And idiotic Bush era, corporate welfare type Republicans who have this mentality. You see these like kind of goofy comical tweets they make where they're like, "We're open for business. Come on in. Everybody come to Florida." I'm like, you stupid people. They're literally they hate Florida. Okay, they just want to use your political climate and your
for their own financial benefit while destroying it.
That's it. Yeah, like Goldman Sachs moved one of their many divisions to Miami last year. Thankfully, there was only very few jobs associated with it, but I actually blasted it, and I was like, "This is the stupidest thing you could ever do when we're teetering between becoming a blue or red state." And guys like that, Mayor Suarez, they know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to make the
shift the state,
shift in a more socially liberal and economically liberal direction. That's their goal.
And so I do think some of the people coming, because I know there are people coming from New York that are Trump voters. So you're gaining some.
Oh yeah.
But the thing is that then there's
working there.
Right, but then they're subsidizing others to come that are certainly not going to be in line with Florida values. But you're talking about the direction of the state politically. It seems that Florida went from this kind of tilt state that would go to either presidential candidate by within 1,000 votes or something, like super down the middle. It seems to be shifting red. It seems to be the kind of state that in 5-6 years, we're not even going to be talking about it as a swing state. I mean, at least looking at this past presidential result in a pretty controversial year, in a year that wasn't necessarily great for Republicans in many aspects, it seems that Florida held strong. Do you see that trend continuing at the presidential level, or you still think it's kind of a back and forth fight?
We have a choice before us. I'll put it this way. If we stay as a MAGA party, an America's First Party, a party with a workers' orientation, where, focus on the working class, a Trump party, basically, to summarize all of that, we will continue to see huge double-digit gains with Latino voters in the state of Florida. Donald Trump flipped. I mean, listen, if the Democrats did this, they would still be writing articles about it. There would be like 10 articles a day.
Right.
Like, oh my God, they made all these inroads. Because it was Republican gains, they
don't talk about it.
Yeah, they just write about the Capitol. There's democracy under attack. But the truth is, what he did in Miami is completely and totally shocking and just totally insane. He literally flipped Miami-Dade by 19%. Now
it was in the 40s. It was in the 40s for them.
Yeah, 19 points among Latin Americans. So they literally love him. They love the machismo. They love the commanding, smart, strong leader who cares about working people and family values. Now, if the idiotic, stupid Nikki Haley type Republicans try to reorient this like politically correct corporate, we will absolutely lose those Latino votes in a heartbeat because they don't connect with the
corporate wealth, corporate ties,
conservative,
wishy-washy. Yeah,
conservative incorporated, as somebody once said. Incorporated. That it's like it's too distant to them. It's weird. It comes across as foreign. They connected with Trump. They connect with the populist message.
And no one understood that. No one talked about that kind of working class appeal that transcended, ethnic and racial lines, and the machismo that you said, which basically is non-existent for most part in our party, which is kind of hilarious. But they're the kind of people that they're the opposite, and they'll go out there and be like, no, this is how you have to win the Hispanic vote. You got to pander, and you got to promote all these ridiculous policies. He didn't do any of that really. I mean, he basically didn't even target Hispanics. I mean, he was doing more to win over the African American vote than he was to win over the Hispanic American vote, and he seems to have made massive gains that probably could have been even higher without COVID.
Yes, exactly right. He didn't do cheap, insulting, innocuous sort of campaign speeches like, "Oh, I'm going to move this policy that helps you people," kind of like rudely characterize him as like a foreign constituency, like we're here to help you, like that's
hola amigos.
Like the Jeb Bush kind of idea of like if we give them something. He never did that. He was inclusive. He was like, his whole message was always like, we're great, America's great, we love the people that are here, we want to take people.
I love Hispanics. Hispanics.
Us. Yeah, it's us. Really is what it is. And these idiotic old versions of the successful Republican politicians like Jeb Bush, Lindsey Graham, Nikki Haley, they don't get that. And they still don't get that. In fact, they're worse. They get it less now than they did even years ago.
True.
They're moving in a direction where they're not, they're impervious to the that we've discovered through Trump as the leader of the party. And it's going to get worse. So to answer your question, Florida will be a red state. We won by 3. So we won like 1.5% in 2016. We won by 3.4% last time. I think we'll hit 4 points if we stay with the Trump message and the Trump leadership of the party. I think if we go the other way, I think we're back in purple zone.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Hopefully people understand that, because the electoral map will be in our favor if we don't shift and revert back to the broken ways of the 5% Lincoln Project Republicans. But I want to end on another topic that's been big in the news cycle. It seems that Florida in general, especially DeSantis, has been vilified by the media over the last year for COVID. They basically painted this apocalyptic picture of Florida, that you guys were just, walking over dead bodies to get to work because you guys are all a bunch of, you don't care about health, you don't care about COVID, yada, yada, yada. And, Cuomo is a savior. Cuomo is the best. Cuomo knows what he's doing. DeSantis is a buffoon. The whole shtick. We've been hearing this for months, and it seems that there's absolutely no quantitative data to back up their assertions. If you look at it just numbers to numbers, Florida is doing fine. It's doing way better than most states. And if you look at what the states that they heralded, like New York, New Jersey, California, they are not only suffering economically, but they're suffering in terms of the worst numbers in terms of a public health response. As a Florida man yourself, what do you make of this? I mean, is this just an attempt to destroy DeSantis? Is it broader to discredit Republican governance in Florida? What was going on here, and are you happy that it's finally being exposed? Because Cuomo has had a fall from grace this past week.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the best way to explain it is, yes, it's an absolutely, it just sounds so funny, almost conspiratorial. It's a brazen, coordinated, it's happening out in the open, but it's a coordinated and brazen attempt to basically try to destroy DeSantis and to destroy Republican leadership in the state. Something that ever happened to the public is in terms of understanding what's going on in the media world, is the existence of all their Twitter accounts, all the journalists' Twitter accounts. So
there's a record.
Florida's just one state, right? So like a lot of these big papers in the state, like the Orlando Sentinel, the Miami Herald, Tampa Bay Times, Jacksonville Times Union, all of them. I follow all of them. I follow all of the journalists, and they all have their own Twitter accounts. And it's shocking that like nobody at the none of the publishers or whatever tell them like, maybe you should try to separate your like private tweets from like the news that you report on, because it'll be like, here's our news story for the day, and then the next 3 are like literally bashing.
What they used to do, they always used to have a separate commentary opinion from news, but that's all blended together now.
So they'll spend like most of their tweets personal Twitter page, right? Attacking DeSantis and attacking Republicans like myself, often very explicitly, especially me, very explicitly. I
saw some things on Twitter already when we went live, so I could already tell.
They're on it. But they're very specific, and it's exposed them. And yeah, so Floridians see right through it. My only hope is that DeSantis and Republican leaders in the state have the confidence to just say, listen, let them report what they want. Don't let it moderate your views. Don't let it, try to change what you do. I've seen too many Republicans say, well, we can't do that because we're going to get, badgered by the media. We're going to be attacked if we do this or say that. And so they just silence themselves, kind of emasculated Republicans. It's really embarrassing to watch, actually, but I see it in real time all the time. But they've learned nothing from Donald Trump, that you just need to just move forward, withstand the attacks, and just ignore it and don't let it influence you. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a coordinated way of just manipulating the truth. I mean, and by the way, they're still doing it.
Right.
So Florida's proven not just the country but the world what the proper coronavirus response was. Right, Sweden, Florida, and a few other places, and yet still, like, they will report. Like, I guarantee
it's gaslighting.
It's gaslighting. It's just you never stop. You never stop. Big lie. You never stop. You keep on the attack, and eventually, a lot of lazy-minded people just eventually start to believe it, because why else would they repeat it so incessantly?
A lot of people do. I know tons of people who still think Cuomo's a great governor and Florida is a hellscape. So actually, I lied. I want to end on this question. There's obviously a lot of talk of DeSantis for 2024. He seems to be making moves. He's obviously not publicly. He's not publicly proclaiming he's a candidate. He's not that dumb, but he seems to be positioning himself in certain ways. Do you think he will? What are your views on him running? Does he have a shot? I mean, what are you interested in for 2024? Even earlier, the midterms and his reelection, which I think align both in 2022. Where do you think we are with that? I've heard people say that he doesn't have, he has a lot of these great things going for him, but he doesn't have the charisma and the personality of Trump, or like the force of character, or whatever you want to describe it. But others say, he has the legislative experience, he has the executive experience. He could fill in all the gaps that Trump couldn't. I mean, what do you make of this? Obviously, in a situation where Trump's not running, or even if Trump's running, I don't know, it could be crazy.
Well, if Trump runs again, I'm with Trump. I don't think anybody on the stage has the gusto of Trump, right?
Agreed.
And now that he's, Trump's had the difficulties with this election that he's had, he's got experience. I think he'll be a better candidate. I do think Trump is the best. I probably didn't always think that. I definitely think that now. If he doesn't run, I think DeSantis is a top 3 contender no matter what happens, even if he kind of, doesn't do that well his next 2 years, which I know he will. I think he's somebody to be very seriously, to be taken very seriously. I wouldn't commit to supporting any particular candidate until I knew everybody was on the stage and what all their positions were.
Of course.
I think DeSantis would be great. I'd love to see him run. But also, let me say this is more importantly, he's going to run. It's not a question. He's already running. I think everybody in Tallahassee knows he's running for president in 2024. And he'll win re-election in 22, which he's up for, and then he'll run for president. But I'll tell you right now, who I'd really like to see from Florida run for president, and maybe not everybody agrees with this, but I think if they stop and think, they'll realize it's probably he might be the most Trumpian of all the candidates that potentially would run. But I'd like to see Congressman Matt Gaetz run for president.
Oh, very good.
Gaetz is rock solid on the foreign policy stuff that a lot of these Republican candidates are lacking in, right? A lot of these guys are going to say, oh, I'm super Trump on, 1 or 2 issues, and maybe they mimic his personality or something. But the only candidate I see, and it's kind of almost shameful that there really is only one, in my opinion, but the only one I see who's got tried and true hardcore Trumpian views on domestic and federal policy, also style, and really believes in his heart on everything is Matt Gaetz. I don't even think Mike Pence really agrees with any of Trump's. Yeah, I think the Mike Pence thing is.
I don't think Pence at all. I'm glad you brought up Gaetz, because he's amazing. We have him at our gala up here. I mean, he is Mr. Florida man energy, that's for sure. And my God, that guy could give a speech. You could hear a pin drop when he was speaking, and that was only between laughing, because everyone was having, it was a blast. I mean, he could entertain a room, he can get a good message across. I mean, he is a fantastic speaker that I have just not really seen on our side, or really in American politics in a while. It's natural, it flows. I mean, do you think he has a shot? Do you think this is going to be a Florida man battle for 2024?
Well, I think you just kind of described why. I mean, he's the only one who has the right values and the right political talent, and he's a fighter, and he's not willing to back down. I think a lot of these guys are frauds. I think we're going to have a lot of these Republicans that are like, here are the top 5 people, and then you really take a close look, and you're like, they're low charisma, or like they're faking it on the Trump issues. They talk the Trump talk. They talk the
but they're not real.
No, they're not. They're beholden to the defense establishment or whatever special interest, and they're kind of a joke. I think Gates. I honestly think I didn't always believe this. I just have had some very serious conversations with people over the last few weeks. I think Gates would be the best, but if he doesn't run, he'll run for something big in the state of Florida, and DeSantis should be considered one of the top guys too.
Do you think he? I mean, do you think he would go after? I mean, a lot of people are talking about the Rubio seat. I mean, I know Ivanka is supposed to go down there, and all this other stuff. I mean, what do you think about that?
I would beg and plead for Gates to primary Rubio. I hope any animate being in the state of Florida primaries Rubio. I think Rubio is actually one of the worst elected officials in the state. I think he's a complete rhino. I think he's one of these endless war hawks. I don't think he has even fiscal conservative values. I'm a very libertarian leaning Republican. I mean, I like Rand Paul a lot too.
Right.
I think Rubio's like my opposite on everything. I mean, domestically, foreignly, I think he's just a fraud. The guy never gives up the opportunity to trash her own side. Even today, he tweeted out, the media shouldn't be paying attention to Marjorie Greene, blah, 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 which, as you know, the best way to handle that whole situation is simply, why are you taking shots at our own side?
Right.
We have people who literally want to destroy this country, and you're attacking a congresswoman from Georgia because she's not politically correct. Get out of here. And this is what I can't stand about guys like Rubio.
At least the Dems circle the wagons. They'll always protect their non-politically correct members. And we're supposed to be the anti-PC party, but the pro-PC party always protects their own. It's a real shame. But who were the other three that you mentioned in top contenders? You said DeSantis. If Gates does run, I mean, a lot of people have this thing about congressmen running for president. It's like a no-go. You can't be a representative. You have to be in the House or something. I don't know why that thing exists. Doesn't make much sense to me. But who else would you put in that top three, top five bracket?
I don't get it either, and I think he would be number one. But I would say top five, I'd have to go with, not just personally, but like what would be of general interest. We're definitely Gates. I'd say Mike Pence would be 2, Kristi Noem 3, DeSantis 4, and this is in no particular order. Pompeo number 5. I mean, I would get a vomit saying this, but they're going to take Nikki Haley really seriously. She'd probably be 6, right?
But they'll do what they did with Biden. They'll consolidate whatever's left of that kind of establishment rhino wing, and they'll keep our side divided. That's what worries me, that we're going to have all these great candidates that are kind of, Trumpian and more populist, or definitely more right wing, and they're going to pull each other's votes. And then Nikki Haley, who has no qualities whatsoever that are endearing, she's just going to have this plurality and carry forward. I mean, that's what I'm worried about.
You're making me worried too.
That's what they did. That's what they did in the Democratic primary. They kept Bernie and Warren in the race. So they split the left, and then they got Buttigieg, they got Klobuchar, they got every establishment Dem to drop out and endorse Biden. So then Biden, took it away essentially.
Yeah. We'll see, man. We'll see what happens. I know that DeSantis has really got to focus on re-election. If he wins re-election, which I think he will, then that is one contributing factor to the sort of pattern or map we know is going to exist in 2024, because he's obviously running. If he lost re-election, he's not running. No way he loses Florida and then runs for president.
Right,
so
of course.
Maybe that makes Gates want to go. And I know one thing's for sure: you won't see Gates and DeSantis run. Absolutely not. It'll be one or the other. They're too close. But you're right. That possibility exists, and that's really scary. We got to make sure that doesn't happen. Hopefully, it's like 2016, where everybody's bumbling and fighting, and so the right candidate does get through. Like all those guys could have consolidated and tried to keep Trump out, right? If all 10 guys on the stage, or 16 total candidates, consolidated and did like what the Democrats do, where they'll be like, okay, Pete Buttigieg, you're out. You're going to be a secretary, and you're out. Bernie, you're doing that. Then they could have maybe potentially taken Trump out in that primary, but they were so egotistical and divided that it didn't happen. Hopefully something like that happens again in 24.
Hopefully these Republican egos work to our advantage again. But anyway, this has been a great discussion. We covered a lot of ground here. We'd love to have you back on the Waxcast, Mr. Representative. But please let everyone know where they can follow you, Florida Man Musings, on politics, culture, and economics, and how they can stay up to date on the latest.
Sure, I usually would say follow me on Parler, but that's not the case just yet. So follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Pretty much all have the exact same name, which is Anthony Sabitini. And actually, I'm on Telegram now with Anthony Sabitini, in case they kill our bill and kill all of our other communication apparatus in the meantime. But find me on all those sites and follow me, and I'd love to follow you back. So thanks.
I appreciate it, and everyone stay tuned for more episodes of the Waxcast, and don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple's or iTunes, and don't forget to subscribe, Spotify, Stitcher, the whole shebang, and we will be back very soon with more episodes for all of you. Thank you.